Ladies and gentlemen, Laurence Olivier was recounting a story from Marilyn Monroe, complaining about the cuisine being served up by Arthur Miller's mother. And after the third meal in a row with matzo balls, she said, "Don't they ever eat any other part of the matzo?" Don't charge my time on this, Ed. They're all laughing it out.
There are no exceptions.
Okay. Aren't we going to be quit of this subject? This subject will ever be with us. And people who've been in New York knows that the question comes to us with a sharper edge in this town, because anyone who's known this town, especially in the 1980s, knows that anyone who ventured out at night was in imminent danger of being accosted in the street by the mayor and asked, "How am I doing?" I heard Mr. Koch one night with characteristic modesty say, "I'm here to convert you. And I'm here not to convert, but I want to summon the Reverend Jackson back to some older positions of his and to rejoin some older allies. Because there's nothing I think he could argue against capital punishment that wouldn't argue even quite as forcefully for the position he used to hold in defending the lives of unborn children." Along with his partner, Mr. Hitchens. Now, I gather that he's come to accept the right of abortion in its fullest
I gotta say,
at any time, for any reason,
about
even
that
in the case.
It basically says like, it's really, because it's interesting, because it's like, well, we think abortion is murder, and so see, we just murder them when they grow up. It's like what's the argument there? So we just do the murder now, you do the murder then. So even if you were to agree with the idea that abortion is murder, he's basically just saying like, well, you're just murderers like us, basically admitting that what they're doing is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess his claim would be that it's not as bad because it's it's like, okay, the death penalty, or you're killing murderers, whereas abortion, you're killing innocent children. That would be so like, if you're even against killing murderers, you shouldn't you certainly shouldn't want to kill innocent children. I think that's probably what he's saying. I mean, it's dumb, like, because it's like, okay, first, people being executed are unambiguously people. They've been giving off brainwaves for decades. They're not like early trimester fetuses. Most abortions happen that are literally mindless, but and also there's the bodily autonomy issue with banning abortion. That like there's no equivalent for the death penalty. So I mean, it's like a silly statement, but I get your point that like,
well, yes, but if the idea is, well, they're innocent, then all Jesse would have to say, okay, let's talk about all the innocent people who were killed under the death penalty, and that would be an easy rebuttal for such an argument, wouldn't it?
Yeah, right. Which was already mentioned, but yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that if the point is that it's like, oh, you absolutely can't kill any innocent people, then yeah, I mean, to the extent that you're worried about innocent people getting executed, which you certainly should, then yeah, you should be against the death penalty also. So it's yeah. I mean, I get your original point that it's like kind of weird to say like, oh, if your argument against this goes through, then also you shouldn't believe this other thing that you believe. Like, I think there's a place for that kind of argument, but also it's like really like there's a sense in which, especially like when it's not very closely related like this, you can just say like, okay, I mean, I don't know, maybe, but like, meanwhile, are you granted that this is wrong?
Yeah, exactly. I don't want we should probably keep going.
Yeah.
Case of children who are partially delivered in the case of the grisly partial birth abortions. The Wall Street Journal remarked that even those of us who accept capital punishment wouldn't accept a procedure in which we take the condemned man and crush his skull and suck his brains out. And yet that seems to be the procedure that the Reverend Jackson's friend in Congress are quite willing to accept, rather than accept even the slightest restraint on the capacity of people to take life. For people of ordinary wit, it must matter profoundly as to whether we're dealing with innocent life or taking the lives of people who have already taken the lives of others in the most vicious way. And I think it will require some high powers of alliteration to explain just why no sanctity at all attaches to the lives of the unborn, while sanctity seems to attach to the lives of the most hardened criminals. But with the unborn, their lives may be taken without the slightest restraint in the law. There's no paradox then for our side to begin with the sense that the taking of life at any age, in any condition, must bear the heaviest burden of justification. We take it that the first responsibility of the law is to protect people from the unjustified taking of their lives. And because of that, we understand that the law may have to deploy or threaten lethal force against those who would suffer no inhibitions on the taking of life. It must be, the state must be in a position to take life. We know it must be able in a position to do that because it can't be unjustified more generally to take life in all instances. There must be a critical distinction between the killing done by a Hitler and the killing done by those who resist being killed unjustly by Hitler. And no perspective that puts those two on the same plane could possibly be called a moral understanding. The case I would make for capital punishment would coincide with Hannah Arendt's final summation on Adolf Eichmann, that you've done something so wrong, so deeply and egregiously wrong, that no member of the human race should be expected to share the earth with you. And for that reason, you must hang. That argument can be made by people who reveal no passion to execute and find no particular satisfaction in the building of jails. We can argue as to how widely that penalty ought to be applied, and for the sake of argument, I would be willing to forego most of the executions in prospect in this country, because it would not touch the main issue in principle, which is there ever a case with an Eichmann or a Himmler in which the death penalty could be justified? At a certain point, we'll find ourselves obliged to speak the words of Hannah Arendt, for saying anything less would run the risk of diminishing our sense of the depth of the wrong that was done, and diminishing in the same measure the sense of the importance of the victims. But if we understand that someone like Eichmann or Himmler deserves to die in capital punishment, nothing in their wrongs would be attenuated in any way by the demonstration that somewhere else in the country or the world there's been racial unrest in the application of the penalty. That's a distinct wrong that deserves to be rejected, but it could not possibly offset the wrongs done by a Himmler or an Eichmann. If these people merit that punishment, they would still merit it. We have here a kind of version of that old problem of the old Skinner case, where the legislature of Oklahoma sort of stipulated that certain forms of criminality were genetically transmissible, that chicken thieving fell among them. And Mr. Justice Douglas, with a sweep of equal protection, said that this law of visitors' punishments sterilizes the chicken thieves, but not the embezzlers who have stolen far more. And Chief Justice Stone, God bless him, said, I don't think the defects of this legislation would be cleared if the legislature, with a proper sense of symmetry, went on to the sterilization of the embezzlers as well as the chicken thieves. If the problem is that more blacks than whites are being executed, that problem is dissolved, as Mr. Hitchens said, if we merely execute more whites. As a moral argument, it is utterly empty, and it cannot reach the question of substance. That question has to be faced directly, and it is not faced in the so-called deterrence theories of capital punishment, because there we're asked to consider executing people, killing them out of a speculation that we might discourage other people from murdering, as yet unknown, as yet unvictimized people. The life of that victim, as yet unknown, is apparently thought to justify the taking of the life of the criminal, whereas the life of the real victim is not. Our argument is that capital punishment can be justified only as a form of retribution to vindicate the wrongs done to the real victims, not speculative victims. Capital punishment can be justified only as a punishment that is measured in the scale of things to the acts of killing themselves, to acts of killing that are not accidental, but deliberate, vicious, confirming a disposition that could only be described as evil. At the same time, I must say, we would have to install the most implausible human psychology to suppose that human beings are utterly indifferent to punishments and that a policy of capital punishment will not affect some people at the margins. But when we scale down the sense of the law...
Pause that. He basically just said, do you really believe that? And then just moved on. Yeah. Even though all the evidence shows that capital punishment, as far as we know, does not have an effect on de-incentivizing crime. That, as far as we know, I have yet to see any research that backs that up. In fact, the research that I've shown is that the states that have capital punishment, even though correlation does not equal causation, usually have higher murder rates and higher death and higher rates of violent crime. But the problem is, someone could say, well, that's because they implemented that because they have those issues. And you could just respond that, okay, you could also compare states that have the death penalty, for example, like nation states. Or you could just look at the psychological research that's gone into this to show that also, yes, there is no evidence so far that the death penalty disincentivizes crime. Now, maybe it's because when you're going out to, maybe it's because a lot of murder is crimes of passion. Maybe it's because a lot of people who go out and kill usually don't plan on getting caught. It could be for any number of reasons. But if the idea is you're trying to make the argument that it disincentivizes crime, you cannot just appeal to common sense, which is what he just did. And also the idea that he said that, well, the problem is just kill more whites, and that would be Christopher Hitchens' solution. No, the solution would usually be, if something is being applied in a racist manner, that there are black people who are dying that don't need to die and shouldn't be dying because they're applying it too quickly when it comes to black people in the criminal justice system.
Right.
And he kind of turned it around in a very strange direction, and a very bad faith direction, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And yes, that I think that he's just like he's just appealing to oh, come on, this must be true about the deterrence question, when, as you say, I mean, the statistical evidence all tends to indicate that it doesn't that it doesn't. I mean, right, like there's this classic sort of attempt to do a sort of intuitive gut check argument that, of course, the death penalty is a deterrent, that you see quoted a lot in pro-death penalty writings, say, oh, well, we don't know how many ships at sea are saved by lighthouses, but that's not a reason to tear down the lighthouses. And I've always thought, it's like, okay, but I mean, like, if you had some coastal states that did tear down all the lighthouses and some that kept them, then pretty quickly you would actually have a pretty good idea, of how many ships they saved. And as you say, state by state comparisons, country by country comparisons, the evidence just isn't there about the death penalty. And I think even the sort of intuitive gut check argument, I think he's kind of cheating, because the way he put it is like, oh, well, is the prospect that you'll be punished in the severe way, going to not deter anybody? It's like, okay, sure. But the question isn't, are you going to execute people or just very sternly tell them not to do it again, let them go on their way, right? Like, I mean, the question is, like, should the maximum punishment be the death penalty or, whatever, decades in prison? And, then when you start thinking about that, it gets a lot less obvious that, I mean, because of course, people are different. Like, some people would prefer one or the other, but like, it's like, yes, if I was actually faced, with execution, and even if the immediate alternative was life in prison, I'm sure I'd fight like hell for life in prison, because, there's like, as long as you're still alive, you can hope, that something, that something is going to change and you'll get out. Right. But like, I don't know. I mean, like, if you just said, like, all right, decide immediately right now, right? Do you want to spend the rest of your life in prison, or do you want this to be it? Like, that might be a harder.
That's weird, because remember, there was that person we were debating who was making the argument that actually the death penalty is a moral choice, because some people wouldn't want to spend the rest of their days in living because of how terrible the criminal justice system is. It was almost like it was assuming, like, well, our prisons are so shit and we're so terrible to prisoners that we might as well kill them as giving them a way out. And the solution isn't there. Improve the prison system. It's using
right. So he's granted the obvious thing there, right? Which is that, that like life in prison is pretty horrendous, right? And like different people would make different choices given like thinking, that this was really definitely going to be one of these. But the bigger thing, of course, is that, I mean, most people wouldn't commit most capital crimes if they thought that either one was going to happen. I mean, like, surely if you're actually in that position, like, you do not think that, like if you don't think that you probably won't get caught, right? Then you're probably not. I mean, every once in a while, some crimes of passion, whatever, you might anyway. But for the most part, you wouldn't commit those crimes if you did think that you were going to get caught. And it's so it's like, yeah, I mean, obviously, the concern that you will and that you'll be punished, plays some role. But I mean, like this idea that it's just obvious that people who almost by definition are counting on, not getting either one, and we all know there's some variation about how much people would be deterred by one or the other, that it just should just be so obvious the death penalty can be a greater deterrent that it's like, oh, ignore all the statistics. It's cheap, it's lazy, and yeah, I mean, I think it's like this term is overused, but I think it's, at the very least, it comes right after, as you say, that really bad faith, argument about the racial statistics, so I mean, like, that's the combination doesn't look good.
I would also say that it's, of course, he brought up Hitler, which every time there's a death penalty debate, it's either Hitler or Osama bin Laden or Boston bomber or something like that. Even though the vast majority of people killed by the death penalty are not, dictators and terrorists. Many of them are obviously not great people. But I think it was great that Christopher Hitchens it preempted this by bringing up a mentally disabled Black person who was executed by the state. And I feel that every time somebody asks us to answer for Hitler, to answer for any of these people as why, what if, would you have sentenced them to death, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we should always be able to counter with, what about this innocent person that was killed by the state, that was killed by the state, and the innocent people killed every year? The amount of innocent people, I think it's like 8 to 10% of the people on death row right now are innocent. It's an insane amount of people that are innocent on death row right now in the United States, even though we have DNA evidence and everybody thinks we have these new technologies that will totally not mean we'll execute anyone innocent anymore. And it always comes out, never mind, that wasn't the case. Mm-hmm. So it's good that we preempted that, and we're making sure that the person answers for the innocent people that are killed every year. Definitely in a country where we value very highly making sure that that we prioritize the innocent over we prioritize making sure that an innocent person goes free over making sure that we always get the guilty. Definitely in a country that values that very much. Yeah, right. Like, I mean, out of all the people the United States has executed since the death penalty was reinstated in the 70s, none of them were Hitler. Like, true. And I don't think any of them were even, I don't know. Usually it's not. The thing is, dictators usually, for whatever reason, are never usually executed. Like, if you look at like Muammar Gaddafi, or Mussolini, those are the two big examples we can think of. But that wasn't that was no trial. There was no process. Right. Usually, if citizens get their hand on the dictator that's been raping and killing them for years, it's usually those people will make it so the courts don't have to do anything about the case. So there's not really any high profile cases where this is the instance. It's usually the dictator takes their own life, or they go vacation on an island for the rest of the days. Like Idi Amin, I think famously went to Saudi Arabia after the war turned against him, for example. Yeah, I mean, I guess Saddam Hussein is the example that comes to mind, but yes. Usually either people spend their lives in some sort of exile, or else they're just killed by mobs. It's also like, okay, yeah, the Hitler case, like that seems like the place where the deterrence argument is craziest, actually, right? Like I mean, I can see the retributive argument is strongest with Hitler, or Pol Pot or whoever, but there's no deterrence argument there, surely. I mean, right? Like, do you think like you're really supposed to imagine that, like, Hitler is in the he was like, I might get executed, so I'm not going to do the terrible crimes. No, because he controls his country's judicial system. What is he going to do? Hitler's going to have a trial against Hitler? Like, they never, because dictators are so egomaniacal, they could never think of actually losing the war. They could never think of actually they'd be in that position. They bank everything on winning. And then when it doesn't go their way, I got to really give it to Hitler, though. He did do a great job in killing Hitler, Yes, that's
Yeah, I think Gene Baudrillard said that in the show a couple of weeks ago. Nobody ever gives Hitler credit for killing Hitler. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, like, yeah, the idea that like Hitler is going to be in the, around the command table with his generals, like the downfall scene, and it's like, I'm sure, just in case you lose, you should probably back off from some of these crimes.
Yes.
Like,
I was going to do 6 million, but I'll do 3 million now. Like, it's not. Yeah, I don't think that was a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad enough. Like, it's ridiculous enough to think that people are engaged in like super rational deliberation, before they kill, they kill somebody in a like, in a gang shooting, or in like, or just sort of like personal grudge killing or whatever, but like, but yeah, the idea that people are engaged in rational deliberation, like, as while they're actually ruling the country about the possibility that they will one day lose power and they might be executed, and like, they want to avoid that. Like, that seems like, if anything, even more of a stretch. Hey, I hate to say it, it's 9:04. Do you have to jet?
I was gonna stretch it out. I could stretch it out for maybe 6 more minutes. Fuck
all
it.
right,
I'll do
cool.
it. 6 more minutes. I like you, Ben.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, Dylan. Let's finish out the statement, then let's see if we can do that.
Of the punishment, we scale down the sense of the wrong and the victims. And this was borne home to me by a black woman I met about 20 years ago in Detroit. The night I was having dinner with her, she recalled that about a year before, she had seen from her high-rise apartment her own husband knifed in the street. And the young man who had done that was that day, a year later, getting out of jail. And she said, that is what the life of my husband was worth. 1 year. It's worth more than a year. Could it be worth life in prison, with access to a good library, a Nautilus room, and cable television? Here's a good
point, though. I'm sorry to interrupt, but okay, then what is the life of all of the innocent people killed by the death penalty worth? Is it worth you feeling good about yourself, or you getting that feeling of revenge? God. So every time I hear death penalty is one of my most strongly felt positions.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, right. It's ridiculous. Like, especially because, hey, what if the person is a multiple murderer and before, like, they were already sentenced to death, before her husband's, maybe that was a murder he only admitted to, he only confessed to in prison, like while he was already on death row. Then literally nothing is being added to his sentence. Because the maximum penalty is already being applied. Like, yeah, I mean, you're always going to get cases like that. That's like, yeah, you're already being punished so severely that given wherever we max out, like we've just finished. So you'd say, oh, her husband's life, isn't worth anything. I mean, like, presumably the question isn't like, we're not like adding, like the question is, given all the stuff they did, right? What should happen to this person, and then why, right? Like, is it because we think it's going to lower the crime rate? That's the deterrence argument. Is it because well, it's not rehabilitation with the death penalty unless you have resurrection. So is it that? Is it stopping them from committing more crimes? Like, I can understand all of these rationalizations, and I can even say. Not rationalizations. I can understand all those reasons, and I can even understand saying like, it's that there's some sense in which which somebody who's committed a crime has like given up rights to do certain things, whatever. But like, but stuff like this always just seems like at least it comes really dangerously close to just saying like, that this is like a form of therapy. For the loved ones of the victim. And
even though the research evidence shows that the vast majority of cases, it seems that the majority of cases, or at least a plurality of cases, where people have the execution go through, the victims of the family, they end up not feeling better. In many cases worse, because they thought in some weird way that it would bring their family member back, but of course it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I mean, it's like I
had to highlight that comment, huh?
Yeah, there you go. It's a I think it's disturbing. Thank you for the super sticker, Tab. But I think it's yeah, I think it's incredibly disturbing to say that try to give people that sense of closure should be, like that, like you should actually be taking people's lives over that, especially given the always present risk of taking innocent life. I think that's crazy. But then, yeah, when you factor in that it doesn't even work, that it gets like really, really, really indefensible. But let's see if we can get through this.
Gotcha.
Life of the killer. In the presence of a real evil, in the presence of a Himmler or Eichmann, it cannot be out of scale to say with Hannah Arendt, we simply cannot share the earth with you. I want to suggest to you that if we can't summon at least that kind of conviction, we run the imminent risk of sliding into a subtle diminishing of the victim. And I wonder, I beg you to consider whether we not have the evidence before us. There's a telling test measured in the things we are willing to laugh about. Nowhere on late night television will you hear jokes about the Holocaust or concentration camps. Mel Brooks will come the closest with Springtime for Hitler. And Woody Allen will say that his wife made a dish called Chicken Himmler. That comes near the edge, but no jokes about the victims or the camps. In contrast, Jay Leno and other comedians for a year made jokes every night about the trial involving the killing of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. Yet if we can laugh about this trial, but not about the Holocaust, isn't the measure clear? We have respect for the victims of the Holocaust, but the deaths of Nicole Simpson and Ron Goldman are things we can laugh about. But how are their deaths laughable in the way that the deaths of the victims...
I'm sorry, this might have to be the last comment I make, but the idea that you're deciding whether people die or live, including the innocent people on death row, is whether you can laugh or joke about this joke or that joke, or how that is at all relevant to the conversation, is so fucking ridiculous to me. I'm surprised this man had got a job. I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah, well, I mean, he got a job at the National Review. It's
I got you.
Basically,
the charity work almost.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that, I think if you ever really like, I think if you ever want like really secure employment, then that if you declare that you've seen the light and you're conservative now,
True.
There are these like doors, like cathedral doors, like swinging open, and just this like huge world of like fellowships, of having, of think tanks, of I mean, they could like look if they already used up all the budget for hiring writers, the National Review, like there's always some rich donor you could hit up to endow a little, they'll get you taken care of. My sense is that it's very it's a very low bar. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it is ridiculous. Like like I actually try to read that magazine every once in a while just to like see what they're saying, and it's it's a very low bar. But yeah, I mean the O.J. Simpson trial argument is bizarre. I mean, I guess the point is supposed to be that we don't take like ordinary like murders and like ordinary street crimes seriously enough, which it's like, okay, but like even if you accepted that point, that's true, then it's like, all right, that's still as the first speaker would put it, right, all your work is still ahead of you, right? Like that still really leaves open like, okay, great, so we're taking it seriously, now what, right? Like do we do this thing that involves the risk of killing innocent people, that's irreversible, that doesn't actually work, and achieving any of the things that's really supposed to achieve, like, is that what taking it seriously? You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive post-games on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.